Hello everybody. Today I would like to talk to you about my 3-color Sleight Knight slash White Pestilence deck. It's a nice deck that I played in a tournament. I didn't have a very good result, but it was still fun to play and I did manage to win some of the games. I played it in Old School 95. This is not the first time I was playing this deck, but I wanted to revisit it and tell you about it on this video. So, without any further ado, let's go through the mana base first. First of all, we've got Cities of Brass. I didn't want to have a playset because that would be too painful, especially because there are some cards that I needed to activate on a regular basis, such as Pestilence, the Pump Knights, Circles of Protection. That's why there are only 3 of them. Usually this was enough. A couple of Underground Seas. I would have more if I could. Tundras, a playset of them, because we rely heavily on white mana, early in the game especially. We also have a playset of Scrublands. As I said, white mana is the key component of this deck, so we have 4 planes, 1 strip mine, which is always necessary. This is the Atlantic variation of this deck. If I was playing Eternal Central, for example, I would definitely run 4 strip mines. I had a playset of Mishra's Factories, and this is definitely justified in this deck. I mean, I'm not a fan of auto-including Mishras, because this is just not a card that I enjoy playing without any reason for it. But we have got a very nice synergy with Pestilence, so after I clear the board I can activate Pestilence, and after that I can activate Mishra's Factory to let Pestilence survive, because it will count as a creature if I have it at the end of turn. So this was definitely justifiable. A couple of Swamps, because we also want to have some black mana, especially for Pestilence, and no extra islands, didn't feel any need for them. And now let's also go through the Moxen. Obviously there are the Moxen in the required colors. And let's go through the boring part first, which is the pieces of power, the so-called black power, I would say. No Mind Twist, because it's not something I would play in this deck, even though it's certainly very powerful, always. Time Walk is certainly here. Also, I felt like including Brain Geyser, and I think it's a good thing that I did, because in these decks you will sometimes have stalemates. So we want to get to Pestilence, for example, as early as possible. And the last piece of the auto-include is obviously Ancestral Recall, and yes, well, there are a couple of disenchants as well. Now we're getting to the more interesting stuff, which is the deck itself, with all the synergies and combos and such. So the core of this deck is creatures that are based around some kind of hate against the black color. Obviously we have got the Pump Knights. The Pump Knights are very powerful on their own. It is also important that they have got protection from black, and it's not rare to see them going to 4-1 for strike, for example. The White Knights are also obviously very good. They can hold off your opponent's Mishras, and they're just good on their own. Which one would I prefer? I would say that for early game I would prefer White Knight, but for late game Pump Knights. So both of them are rather nice. I actually was playing in 95, as I said, so currently I'm showing the Atlantic version of the deck, but in the deck that I was playing I was also running 4 Orders of the White Shield, so as a total we had 12 Knights, okay, 8 Pump Knights and 4 White Knights, and I removed some extra copies of Northern Paladin. But in this variation I do have Northern Paladin. And as you know, Northern Paladin has this marvelous ability to 2 mana and tap and destroy a black permanent. And I mean 3/3 for 4 mana, it's not too bad for Old School. The most important thing is that we can have this great synergy. Obviously, if I was playing against the black color, I would have basically all my sideboard cards in play, which would be very powerful and very good. But this is not the idea of this deck, of course, because that would be, you know, a little bit like cheating, just playing this against your opponent and hoping that they would have black. No. So the last card that has interaction with the black color is Circle of Protection Black. What actually happens here is if you play Circle of Protection Black turn 1 from your main deck, your opponent will be really surprised, not knowing what is happening, and maybe thinking whether you proactively put this card into a deck, or maybe you're running a whole set of different Circles of Protection for no reason. But as you can see, there is a good reason to do that. And the first reason for that is Death Lace. Death Lace is one of the laces, the infamous cycle of cards that everybody is, afraid of opening in a alpha or beta or some other rare and extremely expensive booster, because this is a rare card, okay, just like the other 4 laces. And Death Lace, as you can see, says that it either changes the color of a permanent, or it can also change the color of a spell that is being cast. What can it do? I mean, it can do plenty of things. First of all, it can save your knight from removal, right? So you just say Death Lace to the Swords of Plowshares. Swords to Plowshares of your opponent is now black, so it cannot kill the knight. The second thing it can do is it can change the color of a permanent, including a land. It can be anything, and this way you can kill it with your Northern Paladin. So you can think of it as a kind of a removal spell for your opponent's permanents if you've got the Paladin in play. Another use would be to change the color of the spell that is being cast, maybe some direct damage spell such as Fireball or Lightning Bolt or Sonic Blasts, anything, and you change the color of the spell as an interrupt to black, and you prevent the damage from the spell. Actually happened to me once and saved me from a game loss, so it was a very nice interaction there. And the last thing it can do is, I would say it's even obvious, you can cast Death Lace on your opponent creature, and after you do that, the creature becomes black, and it means that it cannot block your White Knights and Pump Knights. And also, the good thing is that you can prevent the damage from this creature using your Circle of Protection Black. An even better card is Sleight of Mind. Sleight of Mind, as you can see, changes one particular iteration of color to another iteration of color. So what happens is, for instance, my opponent casts Lightning Bolt on my knight, and in response I say that this knight has protection from red rather than protection from black, and this effect lasts indefinitely. So it means that my knight will always have protection from red, which could be relevant if my opponent, let's say, is running a mono-red deck. Another thing I can do, which is also rather fearsome for my opponent, is that I can make my Northern Paladin destroy permanent of any color. So, for instance, if my opponent is playing mono-white, I will say that Northern Paladin will destroy white card in play for 2 mana, which is, as you can imagine, very powerful. And finally, I can change Circle of Protection Black to Circle of Protection anything using Sleight of Mind. Some people suggested that I use the Sphere of, I don't remember what, but you know the card, which is for 1 colorless mana and 1 white mana, and it prevents damage for 1 colorless and 1 white mana. Probably it could be a good idea. I just found out that I don't have this card, surprisingly, because I'm not always, in the know about all the cards that I have and don't have, so might be a good idea, by the way, to change. Anyway, this is Sleight of Mind, one of the important parts of this deck, obviously. Then the second important part, and I'm not sure which one won me more games, this is Pestilence. So obviously against creature-based decks, this is an extremely good card. I play Pestilence, I activate it as many times as I want. My creatures do not die because I have got the knights with protection from black. I also have Mishras if I want to clear the board and then activate Mishras. And I also have Circle of Protection from black. So let's say for 6 mana, which I would usually have by the mid game with the amount of mana I currently have, I could easily activate this card 3 times, killing all my opponent's creatures with 3 toughness, and also prevent all of that damage. And also at the same time I will deal 3 damage to my opponent. And yeah, this did happen more than once. It is a very fearsome enchantment for many decks, I would say. And I also have a couple of disenchant. You know, it's not something that is very important for this deck. Of course, you can see that there are some cards that could be useless against some decks, and we definitely understand that. But this deck actually works better against creature-based decks. It doesn't work very well against control decks, but even then you can have some fun synergy and interaction. So I only have to tell you about the sideboard. And for the sideboard we've got the red plan. And you know that Repentant Blacksmith is much worse than the White Knight. But it did cost the same. There's protection from red instead. I mean, only against mono red can you side it in. Against some decks that run red but are not necessarily based on red only, I wouldn't even board it in. Even though, let's say, my opponent doesn't have black creatures, I would still keep the White Knight probably. But what is important is that I've got Circle of Protection red. And of course, probably it would be a good idea to put Circle of Protection red main deck, but then that would destroy the concept of this deck that protects me against black and you know, the usability of Deathlays. So yeah, that's what I wanted to do. But of course I would board in Circle of Protection red obviously very often. The swords are very boring, I'm not even going to talk about them. And the disenchant obviously as well. A couple more cards we can use against black is Cleanse is the English name, I think. For 4 mana, this is a Wrath of God for black creatures. Okay, and of course we can turn some of the creatures black, or in response to that we can say Sleight of Mind, destroy all green creatures, all red creatures, all blue creatures. And Exorcist I think his name, is basically the same as Northern Paladin, but much weaker because he's only 1/1 and he kills only creatures, but does so at 1 colorless at 1 white mana, as you can see. And another piece of red hate, just a fun card, protection from red. As long as an opponent controls any red cards, all guardians get +1/+1, as if there were many guardians. In old school, there is the Guardian Angel, which is not a guardian, which is not a creature. I think that is all, honestly. But 3/3, of course, that's too expensive. This one, so as you can see, to have the White Knight, which protects you against red, you will have to pay 4 mana, not 2. But this one also has banding. You know, Silver Knight would be printed much I would say later, probably in Scourge in 2003. So obviously I didn't have that. So this is the deck. One of the fun interactions. I mean, obviously if your opponent plays black, so you think that if you play this deck against your opponent who plays black, the game is over and you win. This is not always true, because your opponent will certainly board in Gloom. What does Gloom say? Not only does it make your most important cards 3 mana more expensive, it also has this clause, which I always thought was useless, that says that your white enchantments with activations, and originally it said only Circles of Protection, cost 3 more mana to activate. And I did actually lose to Gloom once like that. I just couldn't have enough mana to activate my Circle of Protection black. But there is a workaround for that, and it was actually Timmy who suggested it. Thank you for that. Sleight of Mind, I can cast on your Gloom to make it say that not white cards cost more to play, but some other color. Why not black if you are playing mono black? So that can be really cruel and terrible. And I actually forgot about that. In some games I sided out Sleight of Mind, saying that my opponent already has black, so there is no reason to make this you know, change the iteration of black to something else. So this is the deck I had. Sorry for the jump cut. Yeah, so that's all I wanted to say about this deck. I think it is pretty fun. It's not optimal. It has some cards that are, I would say, dead to many board states, but it is a lot of fun to play. Combines two fun combos, two fun synergies. If you just pull it apart and leave only the Pestilence with protection from black, so if you make it a 2-color Pestilence deck, maybe it could be more interesting to play, or maybe if you can just focus on Sleight Knights, aiding some staples such as Disenchant and Swords to Plowshares, it can be more viable and more powerful, but this is just a lot of fun to play, like a small toolbox of different cards that your opponents very often do not expect, especially talking about some interactions that can be created with that. So thank you for watching. I will be back with more deck techs and videos, and I'll see you soon. Bye.